Broadcasting from the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, to around the globe. You're listening to Shark Bite Biz, your exclusive place for business strategy, sales, marketing, and tech in the roaring 20s. And now, here's your host, David Strausser.
I'm your kicking host, David Strausser, and it's time for another epic episode of Shark Bite Biz, your place to learn how to grow a business during complete chaos. Another week and another awesome show. Today we're going to talk about a pretty awesome topic, obviously. Malware, malvertising, and ransomware. While we are all digitally transforming and working from home, new threats are looking to take every penny we got, both what we have personally and the businesses that we represent. There's a lot of creative people out there that are just flat out bad. It goes back to the ages-old cat and mouse game with good people chasing the bad ones because the bad ones are always going to be a step ahead. You're always playing catch-up. And it is hard to prevent sometimes what you don't know even exists. But that being said, there are some obvious tell signs of what you can see floating around that can kind of tip you off like, hey, this might not be so kosher, and give you some ways to actually protect yourself. So we're going to talk about the type of impacts that COVID-19 has had on these malvertising attacks, and we'll hear from an expert themselves about which industries have been targeted the most, especially since the overall demand for advertising has impacted the malvertising threat levels. So who do we got as today's guest? None other than Matt Gillis. Matt is the CEO of Clean.io, a digital engagement security company that protects websites and e-commerce merchants by protecting their revenue and their user experience. So without further delay, let's bring Matt on in here.
Business strategy.
Matt, welcome to Shark Bite Biz. We're so glad to have you here today.
Hey, thanks for having me. We're super excited. Tell our story.
Oh, yeah. I can't wait to hear it. So very first question, on this show, we have a tradition, okay? It's a softball question. Tell us, who is Matt Gillis? What's your experience? What's your background? What do you do? What's your job? Tell us all about you.
Awesome. I'm Matt Gillis. I'm the CEO of a company called Clean.io. We're a cybersecurity company based in Baltimore, Maryland, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we do and how I got there. But listen, I've been in the media business and in the mobile business pretty much my entire career. So about 20 years or so in mobile. I started in the early days working for wireless carriers. So I worked for Bell Mobility out of Canada, and then I came down to the States and worked for Verizon Wireless. And a lot of the things that I've done throughout my career, specifically back to the early, I would say to almost 2000, is while I was working at the operator, I was launching a bunch of the services of all that you do on your cell phone except make phone calls. So all of the things that you live on now, I was doing back in, call it like 2000 to 2003. Things like playing games, things like downloading music, downloading ringtones, if you remember those days.
Oh, yeah. I was the same way. I was an early adopter with the Windows mobile phone. I think it was, what was it, Windows Mobile, like CE or something like that.
Yeah, I had one of those.
And people always made fun of me, like, oh, you have what? I'm like, dude, this is like a computer in my hand, and I can make phone calls.
Yeah. Well, listen, I started working at the wireless carriers when the phones were basically like bricks. If you remember how big they were, like the first Motorola phone. And I thought I was cool because, this is in the 90s. I got to put that phone in my back pocket and walk around the shopping mall, and I was the only one of my friends who had it because it was free. So I worked at the wireless operators in those early days. And then I got the entrepreneurial bug to really go out and take I would say a little bit of a risk. I was part of a early stage mobile games company back in the early 2000s. We made games like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Like a lot of TV game shows. And we sold that company to a Japanese video game conglomerate called Capcom. They
Oh,
made
never
Street
heard of
Fighter
them.
and Resident Evil and all that sort of stuff. But they were really looking. They knew that mobile was going to be important, and they were looking for someone that really understood the casual side of mobile. They knew that mobile was going to be casual, and all of their intellectual property was hardcore. So went there and ran that business for a while. Then went to the mobile ads business. As mobile games, it became really hard to get people to pay for things. I had this inkling that ads was going to be an integral part of how publishers and developers would monetize. So I went to a startup called Millennial Media, rode that wave, which was a rocket ship. We took public on the New York Stock Exchange. We eventually sold that company to Verizon. And part of my challenges in that ads business was that there were ads that were destroying the user experiences and destroying revenue and monetization for publishers. And in the role that I had, we really didn't have any solutions. And so now I'm the CEO of a company that solves, among many things, they solve that problem. It's called malvertising. If you're on a phone and you're scrolling and it says, it's all of a sudden your screen gets taken over and says, congratulations, you've won an Amazon gift card, or your phone has 33 viruses, click here. That's called malvertising. And so our company solves that problem. And then we've got a couple of new products in development that I can tell you about. But, I've had this kind of awesome, I feel like, I'm chain smoking like one great opportunity after the next. And, it just keep getting better as we go.
You just took me through like an emotional joyride of all the tech I think I've experienced in the last 20 years, hearing some of the things that you've been through, and ads is interesting, especially when you start getting into games, mobile devices and stuff. It was true. I think it was especially true in the early days that people didn't want to pay for games and you needed some way to monetize it. And I think ads was, the logical way to go. And and you still see this sometimes today with some apps, but it drives me nuts when you get in a free app and there is nothing but like the malvertising that you're talking about. That's one of the quickest things that'll make me uninstall an app in this day and age.
Yeah, it's a painful problem, and that's for us, it's a bit of a passion project because we have empathy. We experienced it not just as a user, but as an operator of a business. It's interesting in my career, I've seen the business models change along the way. In my earliest days in the games business, customers were indeed paying for games. So when we were selling Who Wants to Be a Millionaire,
I wasn't,
and that was that was through Verizon Wireless. Customers would pay a $2.99 monthly subscription and we would make a lot of money.
Right.
But when the iPhone came out,
that. Yeah,
the iPhone changed everything, right? So like the iPhone, democratized access. Any app developer could get any app live and you could find an audience. And obviously in the early days, there weren't millions and millions of apps. But if you kind of, charged forward on that gold rush, you had an opportunity. We actually at Capcom, we did some of the most innovative stuff in the early days of what was called in-app purchases. If you're, you know what that is now. It's like a free, they call them freemium, free game. You can buy things. And the first game that we launched with in-app purchases at Capcom was this game called The Smurfs Village. And if you Google it, you can read all about it. But it is the reason that parental controls were actually installed on iOS devices. Because what we were doing is if you think about it, the Smurfs Village was basically Farmville. If you remember Farmville.
Right. Yeah.
Popular game by Zynga. It was Farmville with blue people. All right. So we basically, and in the games business, there's no new ideas. There's just variations on old ideas. Right. And so we took Farmville with Smurfs and made the Smurfs Village. And it was free. So it was freemium. And the way that we monetized was we would sell these things called Smurf berries. And lo and behold, there were no parental controls in those days because this is the early days of the iPhone. And parents were downloading the game. It was like the virtual babysitter and then handing it to the back seat to their kids. And the kids were like literally pounding, buying like bushels of Smurf berries to the tune of like $99 a bushel. And you can read about it. There was, whole litigation and parental controls.
Now that you're saying that, it does ring a bell. I mean, mobile stuff like that's one of my personal passions. I mean, I probably have read Engadget every single day for, I don't know, the past 10, 15 years. I very rarely that I miss a day. And, mobile gaming, even though I'm not gaming as much today, I still like to know about the industry trends, where that technology is going. Because, I mean, if you look at something like Xbox with their Connect, I mean, while the Connect wasn't a big hit on Xbox, I mean, that technology actually has real world uses that has changed a lot of industries too. And I don't know, I just always kind of fell in love with that. So
Yeah.
let me ask you, the first topic of discussion here is with, we got this global pandemic going on. I don't know if you've heard about it. I know you're calling in
Try
from
not to read
Toronto
the news,
today.
but
Yeah,
yeah, try
yeah,
not to read the
yeah.
news, but yeah, I've heard something about this thing.
Yeah, and we're in this weird thing. I've been saying since about August, it looks like we're at the tail end of this. And here we are recording this interview in November, and I don't even see an end of it now. So, how has this virus, has COVID-19 affected the malvertising landscape?
Yeah, that's a great question. So maybe I'll take a step back and articulate to your audience kind of what it is and how it works, and then you'll understand the
Yeah,
dynamics of how COVID. But so basically, malvertising is, it's the existence of malicious ads, right? So generally, what happens is a bad actor is buying ads on websites and using that as a Trojan horse to either infect the device or to create an engagement that is monetizable for them. Think
right.
of bad actors as the most sophisticated performance marketers on the planet. And so what
Yeah.
they're doing is they've figured out how to buy an ad. And in a real brand advertiser, when they buy those ads on your mobile phone or on your laptop, they're going to pay, call it like $1 for 1,000 impressions.
Right.
And they would hope
CPM,
that
right?
CPM, yep.
Yep.
They would hope a cost per million, cost per meal is what they
Mill,
call it,
yes.
but cost per
Yep.
thousand, a mil, MILE. But what they're hoping is that if they can get a half a percentage to actually click on those ads, like that's success for a brand advertiser. So a half a
Okay.
point. A malvertiser has figured out how to buy that same ad, $1 for 1,000, and actually get it to automatically click itself, and they get 1,000 engagements, not just, call it
Right.
50. And so, so if you fast forward to the pandemic, what we saw across the internet, our code is running right now on about 7 million sites. And we behaviorally analyzed tens of billions of ads per month. What we saw was, as you know, in March, when the pandemic hit, the economy kind of took a pause, right? You couldn't go to restaurants, you couldn't travel, you couldn't fly in airplanes, you couldn't stay in hotel rooms. Most people were locked down.
Couldn't get your 2-day Prime delivery.
Well, I don't know. Amazon did. I think Amazon did a pretty good job.
They
But
did pretty
all
good.
that being,
Yeah,
yeah,
they did pretty
all
good.
that being said, many big brand advertisers paused, right? So they stopped their spending. And when big advertisers stop their spending, obviously the ecosystem that we live and breathe in is a supply and demand ecosystem, right? And so
Right.
when supply is high and demand is low, obviously prices come down, and vice versa. When you get constrained on supply, prices go up. So when a whole bunch of like really bellwether brands pull their money back, pricing came way down.
Yeah.
Fill rate came way down. And what that did was that created an opportunity for bad actors. Think of bad actors as performance advertisers. As I said, what they're going to do is when they have an opportunity to increase their ROI, to increase their profitability, they're going to spend. And so what happened was we saw threat levels in the early days of the pandemic, generally speaking, from mid-March to about mid-May, significantly increase, where bad actors now were conducting more activities. And a lot of what they do is, like think of it like bounty-based ads, right? So
Right.
it may say, click here if you're a Comcast customer. They know you're a Comcast customer because they actually
The IP address.
they target it. Yeah, they targeted you as a Wi-Fi on Comcast, and they're doing Comcast surveys. Now, Comcast is paying someone to conduct surveys. They probably wouldn't be thrilled to know that this is how they're getting their survey results. But this is one of the ways that these affiliate offers kind of get, traded and traded and retraded. And they end up, with their brand, taking over your screen, and you can't hit the back button and you can't hit close. And as you said, you probably never go back to that app or that site again because you're just so frustrated with the experience.
Oh yeah, definitely. And just for clarity's sake, I mean, for our listeners out there that might not be super technologically sophisticated, malvertising is different than things like ransomware and stuff like that. But malvertising can lead to getting ransomware on your device, correct?
Yeah, generally speaking, like they're using the openness of programmatic media, which is
Hmm.
basically the buying and selling and the automation. Think of it like the stock exchange for mobile ads, right? So they're using that openness where anybody can go and get a seat on a demand side platform, a DSP, to
Hmm.
actually create a campaign, and they can buy across, you name it. Like every site on the internet is seeking to monetize.
Right.
The malicious ad is really just that Trojan horse to have that engagement with the end user. And it
What
can
was
take a
DSP
variety.
again? Sorry, I had missed that.
DSP
DSP?
is an acronym for a demand side platform.
Okay.
And so there's lots of companies out there. I mean, Google has a demand side platform. The Trade Desk is another, very popular demand side platform.
Okay.
And it's just basically software for you to be able to go and buy ads if you're an advertiser.
Okay. Okay. So with malvertising, I mean, one of the things I think we've all had is scammer like help desk. Oh, your computer has 7 viruses. Call us, and then you're talking to somebody like out in India or wherever. This is one of malvertising. That is the stuff that will lead to those types of opportunities as well, too, right?
Absolutely, and and
Okay.
and it may be click to call. Like, so think of it as, I keep going back to that, like they are performance advertisers. So
Hmm.
go back to that, like how do performance advertisers try to drive performance? Well, obviously they're trying to create that first engagement, and then there's a call to action, and that
Right.
action may be click here, and it initiates a phone call to a call center somewhere where they try and tell you that your Windows is out of date and you need to pay
Yeah.
them, and it's like that sort of
Yeah.
thing. By the way, it could also be something as simple as clicking you into the app store to download
Hmm.
a VPN app or some other piece of software, where they're getting paid a bounty for every download that they generate. So, like, all of these interactions are monetizable, and it really can take any flavor. It's just that initial action of like how they buy that ad, how they inject
Right.
malicious JavaScript to take over your experience, and then force you to either engage or you abandon. And folks like you and I are somewhat smart. I'll
Yeah.
give you more credit than me, but you generally wouldn't engage with those kind of experiences. You kind of like, if it
No.
looks like a duck and walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, you're
All
like,
right.
this seems bad.
I've said it
But
away from
my
it.
mom, like, she may look at these things, and by the way, sometimes they spend a ton of money and time and effort on making the creative look very legitimate.
Oh
And
yeah.
in oftentimes it spoofs, like, it spoofs the
Spoofs the
user to think,
email.
oh,
Yeah.
or it looks like a Facebook page, or it looks like a Netflix page. And generally speaking, there's probably a spelling mistake somewhere in there, or a grammar mistake. If
Yep.
you actually read it, you're like, okay, that's why it's not real. But so yeah,
Yeah.
they're spending
Yeah.
a lot of time and effort on making them look incredibly legitimate.
Yeah. No, I will admit I got this was through email. It wasn't malvertising, but I got one for our voicemail system that luckily the antivirus caught it. But usually when someone leaves me for Vision 33, my day job, they leave me a voicemail, it will go to my email, and it looked legit. Like, we have flags on our emails that say, hey, this came from outside the organization, watch out. It wasn't even flagged. I don't know what
Wow.
they did. I click it, and then it was like, oh my God, I got caught here. They got me. Now, luckily, the I think we used Trend Micro on the work computers, that it was caught. It didn't install it. I didn't realize even that it was installing anything, because it looked like it was an audio file when I clicked on it. So that is rare that happens, but they are getting a lot smarter with how they get around. And I have to do this because there is this one Twitch streamer, YouTuber that I listen to. His name's Kip Boga, and he actually goes out against, he looks for those malvertising people, and he turns the scam around on them and waste their time and stuff like that. And it's really it's entertaining, it's funny, and I have to give him a shout out because I'm a huge fan of his channel. But anyways, so how does malvertising actually impact publisher revenue and subscriber churn then? What kind of negative impact does that have?
So you just said to me earlier in the podcast that when, if you're on a site and that happens, you probably never go back to that site.
Right.
As you know, content is king. And when you create content, it's very expensive. And when you try and drive users to your website to consume that content, that's also expensive.
This podcast is very expensive.
I assume high production values.
Yes, high production.
These publishers are trying to create this flywheel, right? Where like you create content, you spend money to drive users to your site, and then you monetize. And what happens with malvertising is that it messes up that entire loop of monetization. And so you'll see user churn. You'll see, for instance, most publishers have a very predictable revenue model. They know that, if they drive X amount of page views, they'll serve X amount of ads per user because that user will spend X amount of time on site. And usually when you're under attack, all of those KPIs will actually start to be impacted. So if someone had an average of 8 minutes in time on site, that 8 minutes generally would go down to 1 minute. If average ads per user was 42 over that session duration, that also gets impacted. So you see that full economic impact that is, obviously destructive. And then there's the reputation risk, which is like, no one wants to go to the most trusted name in news and have a really crappy experience. Right. And so, you've got to be able to, if you're going to spend money to create content and drive users to your site, you've got to give them a great user experience. And so that's paramount.
That's where there's a lot of companies. Okay. So let's just say I'll use my podcast as an example. If I had ads on sharkbitebiz.com, okay, I could technically be innocent in this as far as I'm not aware that the ads that are being put out are the malvertising ads, or would I have to willingly be the person putting it out there?
No, I think the only person who is willingly participating in this is the bad actor who is buying the ads, right? That would be like blaming the bank teller for the bank robbery. Unless it was an inside job, they're not in on it, right? Like they're like, hey, they just happen to be working at the branch that day. So yeah, no, it's really, now, if you have a problem, obviously you probably see it in some of your KPIs. Your users, if you have a problem, they'll tell you. If you go to Twitter and you search ad redirect and you run a quick search, you'll see countless users with their frustration taking screenshots and saying, hey, site xyz.com, get this under control. And the reality is most folks need a partner like us to actually help them get that under control, because it's, in some cases, it's like searching for a needle in a haystack. If you've got millions of ads on your page every day. I don't know how much traffic you have, but big sites have like millions, tens of millions of ads, right? There you go. So, but to try and find, and generally speaking, these malvertisers, they're not throttling at 100% all the time. Again, I go back to the bank robber analogy. Bank robbers aren't robbing every bank in every city every day. And if they're really smart, they're going to be strategic. And so they're going to they're going to pick their spots and do everything in their power to not get caught. In the behavior of a malvertiser, like probe, try and buy very few impressions, frequency cap. Don't run more than one impression per user, because what you want to make it is so that if it happened to you, that it's not easily reproducible. If it's easily reproducible, they get caught. So it's almost like leaving your fingerprints at a crime scene. So the smartest of malvertisers are not only being very strategic in how they buy ads, but they're being very smart in how they ultimately don't leave fingerprints behind. In some cases, malvertisers will buy ads but not execute their code. They may fingerprint to go, okay, do we think we're in a scanning lab and we're in an offline environment and someone is trying to catch us? If so, don't execute the payload. So they have a ton of that sort of, code in there to really make sure that they don't get caught. And so that's the whole game. It's a bit of a cat and mouse game.
Here, let me ask you this then. I've clicked on a couple sites. I think through Facebook, that would be like local news pages, like it would be xbc.com, and it looks legit for what a local news station would be. And, my friends have read the article, they're sharing it, they're commenting on it, and I open it up and it's like I got malvertising. And that's where I was thinking, like, wow, this is just a spoof site. This is a scam site. But from what I'm hearing from you is that actually probably was the legit site. They're just not aware that they have malvertising on it that's hijacking the page like that. Is that accurate then?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So yeah, I mean, listen, the legitimate sites and, ComScore top 10, top 100, top 250 sites all get impacted by this stuff. You talked about Facebook. Facebook is an interesting use case because we actually just announced our Q3 data, which we said that I think it was about 50% of all threats that we blocked across our threat network in Q3 actually happened within the Facebook embedded browser. And so, as you know, when you're in Facebook and you're scrolling news stories and you click on one of those stories, it doesn't take you out to Safari. It actually keeps you in an embedded browser within the Facebook app.
You have to click the options and hit like opening Chrome because I'm Android. So yeah.
Okay. So the bad actors have really latched onto that as a place to hide. First off, it's cookieless.
Are they doing that then through Facebook, or are they doing that through the site, or is it the Facebook browser?
They're basically just buying that traffic. And they're targeting traffic that has the referrer of Facebook, right? So that they know that it's within the Facebook browser. And so what you'll see is bad actors will target that supply, one, because it's probably cheaper. It's cookieless, right? So it's cheaper traffic. Two, it's plentiful. There's lots of it.
Yeah.
And I think, most importantly, it is a very hard to reproduce problem in those browsers such that they're able to hide. And so their campaign setup can last longer. They won't get caught as fast. And so it creates that perfect storm for where a bad actor can go and hide and get engagements.
Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, Facebook browser, just inside the app, has to be probably one of the most used browsers on mobile devices because it's used so much. I mean, very rarely will I hit the open up in Chrome button. And I would say most times when I'm on my phone and I see the malware, you're absolutely right. It is happening in Facebook. I can't think of one instance where I've opened up an article in Chrome or something like that on my Android that I've had that same issue. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, again, like all browsers are vulnerable. It's not that Facebook is any more vulnerable than Chrome. It just so happens that, like, again, go back to that performance advertiser mindset. These bad actors are looking very specifically to buy traffic that they know that they can have a profitable engagement with. One of the unique things, we haven't even talked about this, but one of the unique things about our software is that we make it unprofitable for them. So we knew that when we built this product, that we didn't want to play this cat and mouse game, which is like, if they go and try to buy something and you block them before they buy it, it's almost like a free at bat. And then they get to go and try and buy it somewhere else or change their URL or do whatever they want to do to try and get through your controls. We felt that the only way to stop this thing was to actually do it on live traffic at runtime when we already knew that it's a real user, real device, real network. And so our code is a single line of JavaScript that runs in real time and behaviorally analyzes the code as it executes on the page. And as a bad actor or any person buys an ad on a page, we're analyzing what that code is doing at runtime. And when we see that ad start to try to break out of that ad and create a fake click or to create a transparent overlay where it clicks itself on an on-touch event or that sort of thing, that's where we prevent the malicious JavaScript from actually executing. One of the key things here is the bad actor has bought the ad. So he is pot committed. He has spent his money. And because we prevent the malicious JS from executing, he never really gets to that landing page that says, congratulations, you won a Walmart gift card. And therefore he gets no ROI. And so
Right.
bad actor then actually, as a performance advertisers want to spend money where they know they can get engagements. And if they're not getting engagements, what do performance advertisers do? They actually block the site, right? And so we've kind of created that negative incentive for them to continue to attack where our software is in place.
And you're making them spend money. That sounds incredible. That's fun.
Publisher gets paid, user experience is preserved, bad actor gets no ROI. It's like the triple whammy.
So with your company, how many clients you guys have, if you don't mind me asking?
So,
How many people are you running this platform?
We're a cybersecurity company. Like we generally don't talk about our who our clients are and how many of them.
Right.
What we have publicly disclosed, we have there's 7 million sites that our code runs on, tens of billions of impressions.
That's what I was trying to find out. The 7 million sites. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, listen, think of it as like, I would imagine some of the news sites that you would have hit over the last week has our code running on. Some of the sites where you would go to consume, sports content or, entertainment content. We're across, I would say census of the internet level websites and anything from Comscore top 10 publishers all the way to the body and tail of the internet. So lots of customers.
Well, I mean, the question that I was trying to get to with how many customers you have running this, you said 7 million sites. So that's a pretty hefty number, especially considering that, a site like SharkBiteBiz for right now, we don't even have ads on the site. We're not needed. So you have a lot of the top publishers around the globe that are running your solution. That has to have a positive impact on the whole global environment, I'd think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. This is an ecosystem play. I remember when I first spoke at a conference about a year and a half ago, and someone said to me, hey, if your software does what you say it does and it pushes the bad actors to advertise on sites that don't have your protection, is that good for everyone else? And I said, well, I guess it is if they all go and get our software. I think ultimately, don't we want to freeze these guys out? Ultimately, don't we want to make it unprofitable? Isn't that the real way to destroy these guys and their business and make them go away? If you're trying to exterminate rodents from your house, you want to get rid of all of them. And so for us, yes, the more we have this network effect of our business is that the more sites that have our software, it's just going to continue to push these guys, into a
bigger
corner.
impact. Won't that also force them to innovate more as well too, to be more dangerous?
I don't know necessarily more dangerous, but I think innovate, absolutely. And that's what the bad actors have done over time, right? So we're not the first company that ever came out to try and solve this problem. There's many folks that over the course of the last 10 or 15 years have tried to solve this problem. The unfortunate part is the bad actors out innovated most of those companies and most of those methodologies. The methodologies in the early days were offline scanning environments, and the bad actors figured out that if they could detect it, that they were in an offline environment, then they wouldn't execute. The next class of folks that went to solve the problem were focusing on the URLs, right? And we all know that you can change your URL every 2 minutes. And so they were taking those URLs and putting them on a block list. Well, the block list is only as good as how updated it is.
Right.
And then the reality is these block lists get massive and they create latency. And so we figured that that's not, the most effective approach. And that's why we went with this behavioral approach, which was, it's not dependent on URLs and it's not dependent obviously on an offline scan. It's actually only when the guy really wants to deliver his impacts, which is when you're online and when you're on a real device and a real network. So, that's where we feel like the behavioral solution really attacks the methods that they're using to break out, not the signature of the URL, which is easily changeable.
Yeah, no, this is great. You are fighting the good fight. And I'm sure, with over 7 million sites running your software, I'd be pretty certain that almost everybody that's watching or listening to this podcast has probably had a positive impact because of your solution. And that's pretty... Yeah, I hope so. So another area I wanted to talk about really, really quick is your business. From what I understand, it was acquired by AOL and Verizon, essentially, right?
My last business, yes.
Yeah, your last business. Okay, with Millennial Media, right?
Yeah, Millennial Media was acquired by Verizon, which Verizon also acquired AOL, and then Verizon also
Right.
acquired Yahoo. So at the
Yeah.
at the end of my tenure there, I was leading this business unit that helped publishers monetize, and it was basically the AOL, the Yahoo, the Millennial Media, and a whole bunch of other startups that AOL and Yahoo had acquired. So yeah,
Okay.
that was the business unit that I was operating.
Yeah. No, what triggered me to ask that was just because I remember you were saying back, I think in the '90s, you were working with Verizon, right? So you essentially went full circle there.
I did. I went back. I went back to the mothership, and it was a great experience. Yeah, like listen, my first job at Verizon back in the day, like I could have done that for the rest of my life and been so
Mhm.
happy. Doing innovative things, bleeding edge. But I went on a little bit of a journey, on an entrepreneur's journey
Mhm.
for maybe 10 years, 12 years or something
Yeah.
like that. And then I ended up back at the mothership, and
Yeah.
I stayed
Yeah.
3 years.
That's funny.
I had three
Cool.
great years after acquisition, and then it was time to flex the stretch the entrepreneurial muscles and get
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah, no, we love talking about the individuals on this show as well too, and how the individuals have made it. And I wanted to come back to this topic real quick because you've had two companies that were acquired by major companies. I mean, you have Capcom, and then you have the AOL/Verizon acquisition. When you started your businesses, okay, did you start these businesses with, hey, I'm going to ramp these businesses up and then hope that someone buys it? Or like, what was your mentality when you launched both those businesses that got acquired?
So I'll talk about the video game business first. I mean, I don't think you can
Mhm.
launch any business with the hope that someone acquires it. Obviously, I think you're
Mhm.
launching a business with the hope that you're going to build a sustainable, viable business that is going to be
Right.
profitable at some in the term.
Mhm.
The business on the video game side, we bootstrapped that. So it was me and two other guys,
Right.
and it just so happened that, like, when we had a couple of these intellectual properties, like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader, that we actually had really good traction. And at the time, this is before the iPhone, we had distribution agreements with all of the wireless carriers, and
Mhm.
so that was appealing to someone, and they were willing to pay a reasonably good price for us to go and continue the journey. And as I said, I stayed at Capcom for 4 years after the acquisition, which was
Yeah.
like we were still in build mode. We
Mhm.
launched Murph's Village in that time that I was there, and a whole
Mhm.
bunch of other games,
Yeah.
Street Fighter on the iPhone. But
Yeah.
yeah, like so. I would say, like, you don't really necessarily build a business with the hope that it's going to get acquired, but ultimately, for me, like right now in the business that I'm in, it's a startup, and so
Right.
I made way more cash when I was working at a big time job than I
Mhm.
am right now. But what I have is ownership and equity, and ultimately, I hope that that's going to be very valuable someday to someone,
Right.
whether that's at Millennial Media, I wasn't the earliest employee there. I was employee number 75.
Wow.
But our equity was worth something, not because we got acquired, but because we built a long-term sustainable business that we actually took public on the New York Stock Exchange. And so there's various different ways and paths to liquidity. I think it's just, if you focus on building the right thing that people like and people are willing to pay for, you'll control your destiny.
Yeah, no, that's great entrepreneurial device. I'm thinking about mobile devices. Uh, so, last question I have for you is: we've talked a ton with you. This has been awesome. It's been extremely informative for everybody. What are some of the latest trends right now with the malicious advertising, attacks across SSPs, DSPs, browsers, devices? What are you seeing? What can our listeners watch out for?
The data that we just launched. If you go to clean.io, you can see our most recent smart report that we just released with our Q3 data. Typical phenomenons that we've seen. I talked a little bit about Facebook and how that has
Right.
been I would say a hot spot for attacks. The patterns of behavior of bad actors. Generally speaking,
Mhm.
we see this as like a weekend sort of thing. So, and most folks ask, like, why do bad actors do this stuff on weekends? Generally speaking, that's when the ad operations people that run these monetization businesses aren't sitting in front of their PC. So they try and,
Oh, wow.
attack when people aren't looking, a whole bunch of those sort of things. I would say that we've also seen more and more attacks happen outside of the ads ecosystem. So because we're code on page, we can see what's happening. What we're seeing are other attack vectors like client-side injections, where they're happening from either compromised Wi-Fi or browser extensions that are compromised that are sitting resident on your device.
Yeah.
And then we've also seen this kind of phenomenon of cloaking, where the bad actors are cloaking either their images or their landing page URLs and swapping those out, and throwing in like Bitcoin scams and fake death ads and all that sort of stuff. So bad actors are keeping us on our toes, but we're as a cybersecurity company, you got to kind of be a little bit paranoid all the time, and assume that they're trying to break in, and always be on your toes.
Okay. Hey, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. How can people reach out to you?
So if you want to engage with our company, clean.io is where you'd find our company. If you want to find me, hit me on LinkedIn. You can find me, Matt Gillis. And if you want to send me an email, matt@clean.io.
Perfect. Hey, thank you so much for your time today. This has been amazing. And once this pandemic thingamajig is all over, I'd love to get you back on sometime next year to kind of talk about what the trends are post-pandemic.
Listen, we've got some cool products on the e-commerce side that are coming up. And one of the biggest trends in the pandemic has been that we've seen basically 5 years of what we would have expected would take 5 years on the e-commerce side, really compress into like the last 9 months of growth, right? Where e-commerce has just kind of rocket ship and taken off. I talked a little bit about client-side injections and how we're seeing those kind of manifest. And one of the things that you may be aware of is there's this thing called Honey, or another thing called WikiBuy, which help consumers save money by in an automated fashion, throwing in a whole bunch of promo codes at checkout and saving you 10, 20, 30, even 50% off of your shopping cart. We think that's pretty destructive. And so what we do, if you think about our business on the ad side, we help publishers preserve revenue and preserve reputation and preserve user experience. We're going to do that same thing on the e-commerce side. So if you're interested in the e-commerce side, if you want to go to www.blockcouponextensions.com, we actually are in closed beta. And we give e-commerce merchants that same sort of protection and peace of mind that our publisher partners get, which is they put our code on their page and we prevent all of these malicious and untrusted code extensions from jamming in promo codes at checkout. Saves them a ton of revenue.
Hold on. We've got to touch on this topic. This interview is not ended yet.
But wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more. We're in overtime here. So why? Okay, so I can understand from a vendor standpoint why you think that is destructive, but oftentimes it does benefit the consumer, giving them a deal. Why would you want to actively block that for businesses? I'm interested in this.
I would just take a step back. Sometimes we got to take our consumer hat off and go into the business owner's hat. And, I would say one vertical that I think has been obviously very deeply entrenched in coupons is like the grocery market, right? And so you think about, you go to the grocery store and, some people are coupon cutters and that inspires them to go and buy the item. And when they get to checkout, they hand that coupon to the, checkout guy or gal, and they scan that coupon and you save, $1 on your dozen eggs or whatever that is, whatever inspired you to go to the store. How do you think Safeway or Giant or Loblaws or wherever you live, those grocery stores would react to someone as you're at checkout, someone standing beside you as a consumer and handing you a mitt full of coupons that saved you 30 or 40% off of your grocery order? I don't think the grocery store would be that excited about someone coming into the grocery store and standing there and saving everybody and eroding their revenue and their margins. Now, you're right. As a consumer, you'd be like, I'd love to save that. But I just don't think that's the intention of why coupons exist or why promo codes exist. Promo codes exist to drive incremental sales. Merchants will work with social media influencers, and they'll say, if you're a social media influencer, here's a custom code that says like, Kim K 20 for Kim Kardashian. And they hope that Kim K tells everybody to go and buy this cosmetics thing. Right. By the way, if it inspires people to go do it and use her code, great. But what they didn't intend was for that code to be applied to every single consumer that came through at checkout, because that will really mess up their marketing attribution. That will really mess up their revenue and their profitability. So that's really what we're doing, is like, we're trying to give those controls. Like, we believe that if you own your website, you should be able to control the code that executes on your website. It's your website. Right. You deserve that ability to control. So the reason we give, some of the biggest sites on the internet that control to protect from malicious ads is they want their users to have a good experience on their site. In the e-commerce world, it's very similar, right? Like, I think that e-commerce merchants deserve to be able to own and control what happens on their site. And if they want to use promo codes as a part of their marketing strategy, they should be able to do that with confidence and know that it's going to drive incremental and not just stealing attribution from sales that already would have happened.
Okay. No, that's an interesting standpoint. I will say, as a consumer, there's been plenty of times where I've bought something just because of having the discount. Whereas if that discount wasn't there, I probably would have just waited until I got a discount or got it on sale somewhere else. So, I mean, it is a good, valid point, though, what you're bringing up. And also, too, just want to validate, you said about the exponential e-commerce growth. So as I said earlier, my day job, I work with Vision 33. We do ERP for small to mid-sized businesses with SAP Business One. And typically, I mean, right now we're getting a ton of phone calls of companies that are like, hey, back in February, we were doing 50 orders a month e-commerce. Now we're doing 20,000. And we have no way to handle that. And these are companies that if they went through a typical company life cycle with expected growth, they'd probably be 2 years or so before they actually would have had to call us. And the pandemic has changed it to where instead of selling in stores or, at events, stuff like that, they're doing it all through ecom. And it's created a big rush with companies like that. So I think, a lot of those companies, they have, smaller margins, stuff like that. The smaller companies, I think, your coupon blocker service could actually help them preserve those margins so that they can grow and then buy my software.
Yeah, well, exactly. and I think, no, really, it's about giving them control of their business. We're in closed beta right now. We've got 20 merchants on board, all the way from like cosmetics companies to interior design companies to sporting goods to direct to consumer food and beverage and all that sort of stuff. And everyone has like similar yet, very different challenges. So some folks are actually spending money on podcasts and they're using unique codes for podcasts. And guess what? Honey then scrapes those podcast codes up and they give them to everybody, which, effectively invalidates, how effective their marketing was with that specific podcast. One interior design company that does wallpapers and drapes and rugs and all that sort of stuff, they told us that they would give an exclusive coupon code to interior designers because they would want their business. And they actually were giving them 50% off. And Honey was scraping those codes up. And literally, a code that was intended only for interior designers was getting, delivered to everybody on the internet that had Honey on their PC. It actually caused them a massive customer service issue because what they had to do was like, they couldn't sustainably allow every order that came through to get 50% off. And so what they had to do was they actually had to cancel orders. They actually had to call customers and say, listen, we can't honor that because that code wasn't intended for you. And so a lot of what we're doing is really trying to help them streamline their operations and make their lives easier and let them focus on the things that they, we don't think that they should wake up Monday morning and have to chase around what was the promo code that got out of control on the weekend because of Honey. And by the way, Honey was acquired by PayPal for $4.5 billion. Wikibuy has been acquired by Capital One.
Right.
Yep. And so
I use Rakuten, but I did that. I do that because not necessarily for their coupon codes. I've done it because of the referral fees that they end up paying us back from the commissions that they get. And a lot of times I go to their search engine, I look, I see, what do I want to buy? Oh, okay, you want this guitar or whatever it may be. And, I'll make my purchase off of that, I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah. Hey, well, listen, I think when it's driving an incremental sale, awesome. When it's taking attribution for a sale that would have already happened, I don't think that's that great for merchants. And so it costs them revenue loss.
Totally agree.
They got to pay affiliate fees, all that sort of stuff. So it just erodes. And listen, we all if the world is moving so quickly to e-commerce, don't we want it to be in a healthy ecosystem so that everybody actually can, run profitable businesses? That's the goal here. So, so that's where we're at. We got 20 customers in beta, and we're going to go to GA probably in early Q1. And but if anybody wants to find out information, it's blockcouponextensions.com.
Okay. Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it. We've done almost 50 episodes here in Shark Bite Biz, and this is the first overtime segment I had. So
I love it.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome. Anything else?
No, listen, rock and roll. I hope everyone's doing well and staying healthy.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt. And looking forward to get you back sometime next year too. Cheers.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Wow. That was amazing. I really found that convo just so interesting. Matt really does know his industry. First, remember, if you found this interview, if you found this episode helpful, do us a favor, smash that subscribe, smash that like button, regardless of where you're consuming this episode at, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you are. We are too. So make sure you smash that subscribe button. And if you really want to hook us up, please share this podcast, this episode, share it out to your network. And let's try to get Matt Gillis and Shark Bite Biz trending. Now let's get back to Matt. This really was an educational conversation for me. I mean, I've got to give a shout out first to his career progression. Talk about just really finding your path, going with the flow. It's like one thing leads to the next. And he's had a couple successful careers under him. So, during our chat though, like I was saying, I really did learn a ton. And I found it particularly interesting when we were talking about Facebook and some of the issues that I've had when I was clicking on links and, just getting some really crazy malvertising results, stuff like that. So I really love when I can use real life examples of my own of what I'm experiencing and get an expert opinion, because if I see it and kind of confused about it, chances are many of you out there are also feeling the same way. Another key focal point to me was just about how much this all affects the advertising industry. I mean, think about it. If you're a publisher, okay, viewers are getting a crappy experience because of the ads you have on your site. And it might not even be your fault. I mean, it's been hijacked by these bad actors. So they're going to be thinking, oh, that .com site? Yeah, it's scammy, and it's really going to prevent you from earning revenue just because of that, plus all the people that they're out there telling. And it also hurts the legit advertisers as well, because people then become skeptical of real ads, and it really does become a lose-lose situation for everybody involved. And just proof of why companies like Clean.io can really help the good people reclaim the net again. This was a fun video, some great discussion. What did you all think? Today's discussion question, really simple. Tell us about the last time you clicked on something you probably shouldn't have. Seriously, I would have loved to hear those stories. Tell us what happened. Let's discuss. Lastly, do you want to be a guest on the show? If so, you got a good business story to tell just like Matt Gillis did? Shoot me out an email, david@sharkbitebiz.com. I would love to hear from you all and have everybody on the platform. So, as you all know, I'm David Strausser. This is Shark Bite Biz, and we'll see you all again next episode. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Shark Bite Biz. We hope you got some insightful info from this podcast. Be sure to subscribe to us through your favorite podcast app and visit us on the web at www.sharkbitebiz.com. How has business changed for you in the 20s? Email us at podcast@sharkbitebiz.com so you can join us and share your story.